Hello YouTube, it's me again with part 3 of my video series, The Secret Behind Noah's Flood. For my last installment of this video series, I want to discuss scriptural insight regarding the angel's abilities to transform and replicate human beings. I also want to go over some apocryphal and pseudepigraphal texts that reference the fallen angels from the Bible. While angels are spiritual beings, as mentioned in Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 14, they can appear in human physical form. The man of Sodom and Gomorrah wanted to have sex with the two angels who were with Lot. You can read about that in the book of Genesis chapter 19 verses 1 through 5. So not only is it possible for angels to take on human form, but it is also very possible for them to replicate human reproduction. As far as gender goes, there is no doubt that every reference to angels in Scripture refers to them in the masculine gender. Angels are never referred to in any gender other than masculine. Furthermore, when angels did appear, they always appeared dressed as human males. No angel ever appeared in Scripture dressed as a female. The confusion about genderless angels comes from Matthew chapter 22 and verse 30, which states that there will be no marriage in heaven because we will be like the angels in heaven. The statement that there will be no marriage has led some to believe that angels are sexless or genderless, because the thinking goes that the purpose of gender is procreation, and if there is no marriage and no procreation, there is no need for gender. But the notion that angels are genderless cannot be proven from the text. The fact that there is no marriage in heaven does not necessarily mean there is no gender. The many references to angels as males contradict the idea of genderless angels. But we must not confuse gender with sexuality. Clearly there is no sexual activity in heaven, which we can safely derive from the statement about no marriage. Understand that the use of the masculine gender by angels when they appear to people in Scripture is more of a reference to authority than to sex. God always refers to himself in the masculine. A poor understanding of this can lead to all kinds of heresies regarding Scripture. So with that being said, let's go over some apocryphal and pseudepigraphal texts that reference the fallen angels from the Bible. In particular, Genesis 6:4. And we're going to read our next few verses. They are from 2nd Baruch, chapter 56, verses 11 through 15, and they read, "For moreover, at that time when he was created, they enjoyed liberty." This is speaking about Adam. Verse 12 says, "And became he a danger, some of them descended and mingled with the woman." This is referencing the fallen angels from Genesis chapter 6 and verse 4. Verse 13 says, "Then those who did so were tormented in chains. But the rest of the multitude of the angels, of which there is no number, restrained themselves." That's verse 14. Last verse, verse 15 says, "And those who dwelt on the earth perished together with them through the waters of the deluge." He is referencing the flood of Noah. And we're going to move on to our next apocryphal pseudepigraphal text. It is from the 3rd book of Baruch. It's called the Apocalypse of Baruch. Not sure what chapter it's from, but here we have verse 10, and it reads, "Destruction of the first created. How is it now so useful?" And the angel said, "Thou askest aright. When God caused the deluge upon earth, and destroyed all flesh, and 409,000 giants." Wow, that's a lot of giants. "And the water rose 15 cubits above the highest mountains. Then the water entered into paradise and destroyed every flower, but it removed wholly without the bounds the shoot." Our next apocryphal pseudepigraphal text is from the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs. This is from the Testament of Reuben, chapter 2, verses 18 and 19, and they read, "For thus they allured the watchers who were before the flood, for as these continually beheld them, they lusted after them, and they conceived the act in their mind, for they changed themselves into the shape of man, and 7 appeared to them when they were with their husbands." Next verse reads, "And the women lusting in their minds after their forms gave birth to giants, for the watchers appeared to them as reaching even unto heaven." More verses that reference these fallen angels and giants. Next apocryphal pseudepigraphal texts are from the book of Enoch. We're going to read Enoch chapter 6 and chapter 7. We're going to begin with Enoch chapter 6 and verse 1, and it reads, "And it came to pass when the children of man had multiplied that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters." Verse 2, "And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children." Let's skip a few verses down to verse 6. It reads, "And they were in all 200, who descended in the days of Jared, on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon, because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it." So we can see here that they descended even before the days of Noah. It says here they descended in the days of Jared, who was one of the first prophets, saints of the Old Testament, one of the early descendants of Adam. So they descended during the times of Jared. Enoch was sent to preach to these fallen angels, and all hell broke loose by the time the days of Noah arrived. You gotta know your timeline. Otherwise, you're gonna dismiss whatever it is I'm pretending to you here, which is the pseudepigraphal and apocryphal texts that were banned from being canon. For obvious reasons, they don't want you guys to know the truth. But I know my timeline, so I know that what it says is very much truth. Enoch chapter 7 verse 1 says, "And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them." Verse 2, "And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells." Verse 3, "Who consumed all the accusations of men, and when men could no longer sustain them," verse 4 says, "the giants turned against them and devoured mankind." So you can see that these giants were cannibals. They were eating up all of the resources on the planet, and when there was nothing or very little left, they started eating man. Verse 5 says, "And they began to sin against birds, beasts, reptiles, fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood." So they were the first carnivores, as verse 5 says from chapter 7 of the book of Enoch. And they were also involved in vampirism, drinking blood. Gross. Verse 6 says, "Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones." So, let's look at some scriptures that quote the book of Enoch. You can read it in the book of Jude, chapter 1, verses 14 through 15. They are almost identical to what Enoch, chapter 1, and verse 9 says. For those of you that like to say, well, they're not canon, they're not considered canon. Oh yeah? Well, how do you explain these verses? Because if you question the book of Enoch, and you question these scriptures that are identical to the verses from the Bible, the actual canon Bible, then you have to question the whole Bible. 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 4 has a verse describing a few verses and passages from 1 Enoch chapter 10, verses 4 through 6, verses 11 and 12. Let's look at the next book of Enoch, 2nd Enoch. It's called The Secrets of Enoch. Chapter 18 and verse 3, it reads, "And they said to me, These are the Gregorii, who with their prince Satanael, which is another name for Satan, rejected the Lord of light. And after them are those who are held in great darkness on the second heaven. And 3 of them went down unto earth from the Lord's throne to the place Hermon, and broke through their vows on the shoulder of the hill Hermon, and saw the daughters of men, how good they are, and took to themselves wives, and befouled the earth with their deeds, who in all times of their age made lawlessness and mixing, and giants are born, and marvelous big men, and great enmity." Also in the book of Giants, it speaks about how some of the giants were seeking the prophet Enoch for an interpretation of a dream/vision they had concerning their demise. If we read the book of Jubilees, it also references these fallen angels and giants. We're going to read a few verses and passages from Jubilees chapter 7, beginning with verse 21. It says, "For owing to these 3 things came the flood upon the earth, namely owing to the fornication wherein the watchers against the law of their ordinances went a whoring after the daughters of men, and took themselves wives of all which they chose, and they made the beginning of uncleanness." Next verse says, "And they begat sons, the Nephidim, and they were all alike, and they devoured one another, and the giants slew the Nephal, and the Nephal slew the Eljo, and the Eljo mankind, and one man another." So these giants were warring with one another, killing each other, and their violence influenced mankind. So they started doing the same. Sad to hear. Let's skip a few verses down. Jubilees chapter 7 verse 24 says, "And after this they sinned against beasts, birds, and all that moves and walks on the earth. And much blood was shed on the earth, and every imagination and desire of men imagined vanity and evil continually." Also in a Bible dictionary, it mentions how King Og of Bashan survived the flood by taking refuge on top of Noah's ark. Some food for thought. For those wondering, how on earth did these giants survive the flood? How did they spring back up after the flood of Noah? As we know, we have the story of David and Goliath, and a few other giants mentioned throughout Scripture after the flood. Well, here it clues us in. King Og might have been the one that sprung the race of giants back up after the flood. So, on that note, I will end this video for the series, The Secret Behind Noah's Flood. I hope you guys begin to see why were some of these books not considered canon, because they contain a lot of truth. So, I guess I'll see you guys in my next video series. Until then, ciao.